Hey, it's Mr. Shrum, and I am back with a biology tutorial. And this one is about the carrying capacity of ecosystem. So we're going to use mathematical, computational, or algorithmic representations of phenomena to describe and support claims and explanation. We're going to apply scientific reasoning and theory to link evidence to the claims to assess the extent to which the reasoning and data support the explanation or conclusion. And an easier way to say all that, we're about to science, okay? So, getting into the activity itself, a scientist is studying the population of a particular species of beetle in an ecosystem. The beetles currently have an estimated population of 11,500 individuals on a wildlife preserve of 115 hectares. And 1 hectare is equal to 2.5 acres of land. The scientist calculates the carrying capacity at 14,600 individuals. Part A. Factoring a death rate from natural causes and predation, the beetle population increases approximately 5% each year. Use the table button to create a table showing the estimated population for each year, starting with the current population and stopping when you've reached or exceeded the carrying capacity. All right, to review, the carrying capacity is the maximum amount that an ecosystem can support, okay? So once the population gets to 14,600, it can no longer support a larger population without causing some type of imbalance in the ecosystem, and the population will naturally stop increasing the population. And people die, animals die naturally from natural causes, and predation is another animal has to eat them to survive. And that's the circle of life, baby. So that's that. But in part A, we're going to create a table, and it'll look like this. And to get each number, you're adding 5% to each population. So you're taking 11,500 and adding 5% of 11,500. That gives you 12,075. Then you take 12,075 and you add 5% of that number. Okay? And then slowly it's getting closer and closer until it's over the carrying capacity here. So that's 6 years later. Part B. What will likely happen to the population of these beetles during the next year if the resource level stays the same? Well, the population will likely level off because it's reached its carrying capacity. That's the maximum number of beetles that this particular ecosystem can sustain. These beetles have a uniform distribution. In year 1, how many beetles are there per hectare? How many beetles per hectare were there in the year the beetles reached carrying capacity? Round up or down to the nearest whole number. So, in year 1, we have a population of 11,500, and there are 115 hectares. We take the population divided by the number of hectares, and you get about 100 beetles per hectare. So 100 beetles every 2.5 acres or so. By year 6, the number of beetles per hectare has grown to 128. During the year the beetles reached carrying capacity, A flood in the region decreased the population to about 77 beetles per hectare. What is the total estimated population of the beetles after this disaster? What percentage of carrying capacity is the population now? All right, so more math. After the flood, we have the number of beetles per hectare times 115 hectares. 77 times 115 equals 8,855 beetles. The carrying capacity is still 14,600. So we take this number, 8,855, divide it by the total carrying capacity, and times that by 100 to get a percentage, and you get 60.6%. So just under 2/3 of the carrying capacity. Over a period of time, the beetles once again reached carrying capacity and sustained it for many years. However, pollution from a nearby factory leaked into the ecosystem, making 55 hectares of the land uninhabitable to the beetles. Predict how the estimated carrying capacity will change and explain your reasoning for your estimation. So, big business done screwed up and leaked their dirty pollution into the ecosystem. Very unsustainable behavior. So, that has changed the game entirely. We went from a carrying capacity of 14,600 beetles because 55 hectares are now unlivable. The carrying capacity would decrease by about 7,040 individuals. That's half, nearly half the population. Half the carrying capacity is now gone. Therefore, the carrying capacity of the ecosystem will be the old carrying capacity minus the decrease. So we get 14,600 minus 7,040, leaving us with a carrying capacity of 7,560 beetles. So, yeah, that's rough if you're a beetle in that land. Next lesson activity is about lichens and forest health. So, we're going to read an article here. Lichens are an early warning system for forest health. Lichens are an early warning system for forest health. Here are pictures of lichens. If you've seen them before, you may recognize them. Ecologist Linda Geiser works her way through thick undergrowth on the steep hills of the Bull Run watershed just outside of Portland, Oregon. Every step in her heavy boots is deliberate. It would be easy to break an ankle here, or worse. A dense sea of ferns and berry bushes hides deep pits and sharp fallen branches. This treacherous slope is a U.S. Forest Service field site, one of many in the United States, recognizable by its bright orange flagging fluttering from the trees. Geiser has patrolled terrain like this for 30 years. As manager of the Forest Service Air Quality Program, she's tasked with monitoring pollution. So she has come here not to check sophisticated equipment, but to find lichens. Fringed and fuzzy, or as slick as a coat of paint, lichens are mosaics of fungi, partnered with algae or cyanobacteria that speckle tree bark and dangle from the canopy. In those precarious perches, lichens absorb their food from fog, wind, and rain. With no roots but very absorbent tissue, lichens are exquisitely vulnerable to gases released from burning fossil fuels and other pollutants carried by the wind and rain. That sensitivity makes lichens powerful sentinels of forest health. So, to recap, these lichens don't have roots, and their main source of food is from fog, wind, and rain. And because of this, they're super sensitive to the air and gases around them. And this makes them very good indicators. And because if they're having trouble, then you know a forest is bound to have trouble later on as well. Where there is pollution, there is a predictable effect on lichens. Rare and delicate lichen species that are highly specialized to their habitat are some of the first to die out as air quality falls. Less sensitive generalist lichens hang on longer and, in some cases, even survive and expand. Both can signal problems to come. A 2014 study linked an abundance of the nitrogen-loving lichen Candelaria pacifica in Yosemite National Park with hotspots of excess nitrogen blown over from the sprawling farmlands of California's Central Valley. Nitrogen becomes a pollutant at very high concentrations. A 2015 study in Washington state tied an area of heavy metal pollution detected in lichen tissues in the Colville National Forest to a zinc and lead smelter just across the border with Canada. Pollution builds up inside lichen tissues in proportion to its concentration in the wider environment. Anything poisoning lichens is also accumulating more broadly in the forest. So these lichens are very super sensitive, and they begin to shift first, but the same contaminants may hit hardier plants and animals next. So they are really good red flags to look for preventing damage to the rest of the forest. That's why Geyser is hiking in the snow, the shadow of Mount Hood. She jots down the name and abundance of every lichen species she finds at Bull Run to track changes in the lichen census since the last survey of this plot 10 years ago. So she's carrying a big bag in her pack, and she fills it with this seafoam green lichen called Platysmadia glauca. And in a lab at the University of Minnesota, researchers will dissolve this in acid to measure levels of 24 air pollutants. Other tests measure sulfur, nitrogen, and mercury. The Forest Service has used lichens to track air quality since the 80s. What began as a few pilot studies has expanded into a national program with thousands of lichen monitoring plots across the country. This information collected at those sites is cataloged in a database used by the Forest Service to track changes in the lichen landscape. Until now, that database has not been publicly available. But in 2017, it will be released along with an atlas of lichen distribution nationwide. Sorry, just the nation. So anyone can track this early warning system. The timing is good because while these fungal melanges have been counted on as air monitors for decades, they have now also begun to show their worth as sentinels. Sentinels means like a beacon of climate change in the lower 48 states and increasingly in the Arctic. So that is one part of this article. Let's see what answers we can provide with that first reading. Explain why the forest ecosystem is a system. Use examples from the article to support your explanation. Well, the forest has many interacting parts, like all ecosystems. They include living organisms like plants, animals, and fungi. Forests also include non-living components that these organisms depend on, such as the soil and climate, as stated in the article. One change, such as pollution can cause a ripple effect through the ecosystem. Dying lichens are one of the earliest signs of pollution. In turn, the loss of the lichens can cause a decline in species that rely on the lichens for survival. So you see how everything's interactive, and one bad situation for one species can affect others as well. We all depend on one another for survival, and if one of us gets compromised, that can compromise everything else. So, part B. Why are the research findings in this article important to a systems ecologist who is researching this forest? Well, the decline of lichen is an important indicator of an imbalance in the ecosystem. This research can help system ecologists predict how pollution will affect the entire ecosystem. Give one example of how the testing of Platysmadia glauca could benefit future ecological research of this forest. Well, okay, so they take that sample, and scientists can use it to help understand which pollutants have the largest effect on lichen populations. It also may help them understand the current pollutant levels in the atmosphere compared to the population of lichens on the trees. This can help them more accurately predict population changes over time. All right. And there's more to that article, but a lot of the main information was in that first part. And that's that. All right. So I hope that was helpful. And if you have any more questions, let me know. Message me in Canvas or email me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But until next time, have a good one, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.